Well, no sooner had the champagne corks been popped with the passing of the National Broadband Network legislation this week than the celebrations went a bit flat. Faced with much higher than expected tender bids from contractors, the NBN company pulled the process indefinitely to mull over another plan to get the $36 billion project built on budget. It wasn't just a rogue bid or two. After months of haggling, 14 of the nation's biggest infrastructure builders were all told that their prices for building the fibre optic network around the country were too high. So what's plan B? I spoke to Communications Minister and holder of the NBN purse strings, Stephen Conroy. Stephen Conroy, the NBN announced on Friday that it's suspending indefinitely negotiations for tenders over the construction of the NBN after 4 rounds of tenders and saying it won't proceed on the basis of prices being offered. So doesn't that suggest that the budget for it is too low?
Well, we support NBN in seeking to get the absolute best value for Australian taxpayers. There's often an approach that because it's a government project we could try and see if we can squeeze a little bit more out, but NBN Co have a mission from the government which they're delivering on to ensure that Australian taxpayers get value for money.
Yes, but we're talking 14 companies here, intensive negotiations over 5 months through 4 rounds of tenders. I mean, it's not as if you're being screwed by 1 or 2 companies.
Well, look, I think the NBN Co, they're a government business enterprise. They're operated at arm's length from me. I understand from their indications they're looking at going through a new process. I haven't been briefed on that at this stage, but we support absolutely NBN seeking to deliver value for money for taxpayers.
Right, but are you saying that there's absolutely no more money in the pot for building the NBN?
Well, NBN have a budget, they've got a business case, and they are working to ensure that they deliver on their business case and deliver the best value possible for Australian taxpayers.
Well, just moving on to pricing now. Looking through the pricing documents, it does seem that it's going to be very difficult to be a small national service provider based on the NBN, and that really the small players are going to have to go through Telstra and Optus. Isn't that right?
Well, I expect that there'll be changes in the market. Wholesale aggregators may come into the market, but the complaint being made by Internode is a very important contribution, and it would have been really fantastic for Internode to have made that argument to the ACCC. What essentially Internode are complaining about is that the ACCC decision to move from 14 POIs, the NBN's preferred position, to 121 POIs, they believe was not the best decision. They didn't actually put in a submission to the ACCC's inquiry on this very matter, but as you would be aware, there were many companies who argued the exact opposite to what Internode are arguing. And the ACCC, they're the competition regulator, they made a judgment and have come down in between where Telstra, Optus and a range of companies wanted and Internode would have preferred. And while the government and NBN supported 14 POIs, the final decision was that recommended by the ACCC. So this is a complaint about what the ACCC decided, and unfortunately Internode chose not to put in a submission.
Well, you're not entirely right. I mean, yes, it's partly about the points of interconnect, and that's obviously an ACCC decision. But the NBN's own internal pricing for virtual circuits raises the bar to a level that most of the smaller players say they can't afford.
There's different aspects here. Firstly, the critique that Simon Hackett at Internode is using is that a company, a newly establishing company, will want to access all 121 points of interconnect. Now, that's an assumption. There's many who would argue that a small start-up company may not want to seek access to all of the 121 sites at the beginning. They would want to grow as a strategy to become a national company. So Simon's analysis is based on a number of assumptions. There's nothing wrong with his assumptions, but there are many who would dispute and say that a start-up company won't necessarily try and be a national company on day one.
Well, OK, let me put it this way. Telstra has 200 wholesale customers at the moment in Australia for the internet. Would you like to see those 200 Telstra wholesale customers switch over to become NBN customers? I mean, after all, the whole point of the NBN was to break Telstra's hold on wholesaling telecommunications in Australia.
Well, it's not for me to decide where companies should wholesale from. As I said, I anticipate that there'll be new players in the market. I anticipate that there will be wholesale aggregators who come in who may not necessarily be Telstra or Optus. You're asking to predict what the outcome of an entirely new set of market circumstances are. But one thing you can be assured of is that genuine retail competition will enter into the telco market in Australia for the first time.
Well, yeah, but it's not much of a difference if everyone still has to go through Telstra.
Well, as I said, you're making an assumption that only Telstra will be wholesaling. There is an entire new industry structure which I'm not prepared to predict what the outcome is going to be when genuine competitive forces start to come into play in a market that they haven't existed before.
OK, so you won't predict how many service providers we'll have, but how many would you like? I mean, is it 5, just a small number of service providers, or is it 100?
Well, I want to see the maximum competition so that consumers get the maximum benefit. I mean, take Vodafone, for instance. They've announced that they will enter the fixed line market in Australia now because of the restructuring of the market plus the NBN, the creation of the NBN. I mean, this is the largest telecommunications company in the world is saying that it's now going to come into the Australian market for fixed line. I mean, this is a huge win for competition. And no one can yet predict what the final outcome of the structure of the market's going to be. So I think people need to take a deep breath and let's see how a few market forces start playing out in the telecommunications sector. And I think that's a good thing.
I was a bit disappointed to see 12 megabits a second speed across the whole network as being the entry level. I mean, it wouldn't cost any more to make it 100 megabits on the fibre, but I presume that's because you have to make it uniform speeds across all of the platforms, fibre, wireless and satellite.
Well, people will have a choice. I mean, this argument that we should only have one speed available, I mean, we're offering people a choice. You've got a business case that's built around people having choice, and that's not something that you have on copper. I mean, you've got no choice how close you live to an exchange. You can have an exchange that offers ADSL 2+ services, but if you live more than 1.5 kilometres from an exchange, many Australians will tell you that the service degrades, and you're lucky on average with ADSL 2+ to get 8 meg down. So we're actually providing a range of choices for consumers to pick from. If someone wants more than 12, they'll be able to buy more than 12. And when you're on copper, theoretically you get 24 meg, but you don't have any choice to go above that on copper at the moment.
Well, with all these things we've been talking about, the construction tenders being called off because they're all too high and the pricing issues in the NBN, are you having to squeeze the NBN lemon a bit too much because of the need to make sure that it's saleable when you want to sell it?
Well, the business case, which was released back in December, stands in its own right. And while there's lots of commentary, lots of individual companies talking their own book today, what you will see is retail competition, genuine retail competition, new entrants to the market, already announced, Vodafone, and you will begin to see a change in the way telecommunication services are offered in the marketplace. You're also going to see lots of new innovation. What we've done is created a level playing field platform and then unleashing the innovation that's been held back by our existing market structure.
Thanks for joining us, Stephen Conroy.
Good to be with you, Alan.